welcome to the Freestyle. I'm Daniel Omach. Today we have a very special conversation about design, architecture, and 3D printing. Shout out to the one and only Yassi Kazem. What's up, Yassi? How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
You already know. So I'm really curious, just to get started, could you tell us a bit about your kind of path in design and your story in the design world?
Sure. So I grew up always being really interested in making things with my hands. I think in high school I was sewing a lot, so I was making a lot of clothes. And then in college, I sort of transferred that interest into studying architecture. And then from there, I rediscovered or sharpened my interest into materials and fabrication. So then after college, I started working at a fabrication shop and then a metal shop, and then more in the manufacturing and construction area of design. So that's kind of my trajectory in a nutshell.
But so when you say like a fabrication and a metal shop, like what kinds of things were you guys building? Because at least I know for me, that goes over my head. It sounds very dope, but I'm curious, like what kinds of things were you guys making?
Yeah, we were making things like, so in the metal shop I worked in, we were doing custom-made sculptures, custom-made staircases for people's homes or for like a business or something like that. In the fabrication shop that I worked in, if you've been to the Kitsune store in Soho, and you go in and you see kind of all the piping that goes through, I don't know what the designer's name was. It was like a French guy, Matthew something. But he designed it, and then he was looking for fabricators to be able to build it and make his design real. So that's kind of the side that I was going on. So if you look at photos of that store, all the piping, all of the tiles, everything that has to do with the physical fabrication side, we were doing drawings for them. I remember doing drawings for those and measuring the store and, all of the physical side of it.
Was there anything like in particular that attracted you to that particular kind of design? That one that's like, it takes the theoretical and turns it really physical?
I think it just adds another dimension to it, having data. I mean, it's a form of data, right? To have information that backs up what the aesthetic is, instead of it just being like, oh, I think this line looks pretty, or I think this shape is pretty, to be like, well, this shape actually makes people who use the space feel this way or act this way, or it does this or does it. I think having that data to back it up always makes the design a little more interesting, and it's heavier, and it's like a more heavyweight design, if that makes sense. It's more substantial. That's what I want to say. So I think that's what really attracted me to it.
Got you. And obviously, Yassi, we've known each other since college, and we have different conversations. And I know we've talked about your path and career in design. Can you speak to a little bit like what it's like specifically being a woman in design, and maybe even advice you have for women that want to think about a career in design?
Definitely. So historically, architecture is just like a white man's club. It's like the simplest way to put it. And I think in my experience of working at these different places, communication becomes exponentially harder when you're a woman in that field. Because every time you want to communicate anything, you're not only trying to prove your point, but you're trying to prove, or you are put in a position where you have to prove why you making this point is credible, and like why you belong you're in the right place to be making this point. So that is super frustrating, and I think that's very relevant to other fields as well. I would think it is. My advice is to use that as your fuel, kind of, and to be like, I mean, not to ignore it, definitely to recognize it. I hate when people are like, just pretend it doesn't exist, because it like most definitely
it exists, like it's here.
Yeah, do not turn a blind eye to it. But I would say see it as an exercise, because it's not gonna, like, you're not gonna be, you can definitely work towards changing that, but single-handedly, I think the way that you can work towards changing that is really using it as an exercise, so that when you come out of that situation, you have a skill that other people don't have, and that skill is being able to communicate at like the sharpest level, you know. And so you come out and you're like, oh well, these are my ideas, and this is, and you can say it super concisely, super, you know, like everything makes sense, and people will be, I think, impressed by that.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, I think it's something that people don't always account for, but it sounds like for women in architecture in particular, it sounds like what you were describing is like, and please correct me if I'm wrong or off base here, it's like you're making the normal, you know, arguments or pitches for the ideas that you believe in, but in addition to that, you have to basically you have to advocate for your credibility as well, right? Which is like it's another battle in and of itself.
Totally. I mean, I can't tell you how many calls I've been on where I was in the position of being like the technical specialist of a product. And there's always like the age-old tension between sales and engineering, because engineers are like, we can't physically build this. And then the sales are like, but we promised this to the client. But I've been on so many calls where it was just like this old white salesman who was talking right over me and talking in my sector of specialty and making claims while I was on the phone, and I was like,
like, so I'm kind of the expert here.
Yeah. So yeah.
So for folks like me who aren't really in the architecture world or space, what are like some cool trends in architecture that you're excited about?
I think utility and functionality, like a functionality has always been one of the, like, you know, designers love talking about functionality, but I think now more than ever, there's this super hyper focus on how does it function? Does it function optimally? And then will it remain relevant? Is it built to remain relevant throughout the years? Is it programmed that way? And so you can see it in fashion also. I think we talked about this with like the technical gear wave, where like everyone's suddenly wearing hiking gear, but like making it fashion. And I think that goes along with politics, right? Like fake news, performative activism. Everyone is so over fakeness and over empty aesthetics that they really just want to know. And then also climate change, that's a huge like issue. And so people want to know, how does this function? Is it the real deal? And is it going to function properly and safely and sustainably for over the years? So that's a cool wave I'm kind of paying attention to.
So yeah, so am I understanding this correctly? It's like stuff can't just look nice anymore. It needs to have a real utility, maybe value that it's giving to like the community or the world in some capacity.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
I do want to talk about 3D printing as well, because for me, 3D printing is one of those things that I hear a lot about, but I feel like I just don't know where we currently are or what's possible with it. Yeah, I've heard like that people can basically create anything with the 3D printer, and I'm a bit skeptical. But I'm curious, you know, for you, someone who's studied 3D printing, looked into it a lot, what do you, or I guess, what are you most excited about that that's coming out in the 3D printing space?
I think the most exciting part of it is the accessibility. And I think we've talked about this briefly before, but in the same way that like the internet, like I think 3D printing is really in its early stages, just like the internet was like what in the late 80s, early 90s. We actually don't know how far this can go, and it's a super powerful tool. So if you look at what access did to the internet and what it turned it into, I think that's going to be the same thing with 3D printing, I hope. And I think that's really exciting, because when you have more people thinking or like using a tool, there will be more uses that come of it. You know, inevitably people are going to be creative in some ways and other people in other ways. So yeah, I'm excited about the accessibility and just, you know, getting more people involved in how to build things and yeah, what it can do. There's just so many things it can do that, yeah.
Yeah, no, it sounds very like tip of the iceberg. Like we're only just seeing the beginning of 3D printing. So I guess what are, for people that, you know, aren't really plugged into the space, what are some things that are coming out now in the 3D printing space that a lot of folks might not know about?
So many things. Oh my God. And they're all so cool. So there's prosthetics.
That's cool.
So if somebody needs a hip replacement or a knee replacement, jaw replacement, anything, they're able to scan the person's body and manufacture or like 3D print a custom made hip replacement that matches exactly that person's like hip socket or whatever. And on top of that, like the surface material is built in a way that is most like conducive to the bone matter and the tissue and whatever else is growing onto the socket for it to like be integrated into your body. It's most conducive to that process of like reintegration into the body, which is super, super cool. Other stuff that they're doing are homes. I don't think they're super complex homes, but saw, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. They're 3D printing places where people can actually, like homes that people can live in?
Yes.
So it's like this has to be the biggest 3D printer ever then, just gigantic.
Yeah, and so it's a pretty big, I saw a video of it, I'll send it to you. I think they're 3D printing them within 24 hours or something insane like that. Yeah, and I think the material that they use is either concrete or some kind of asphalt or concrete or I don't know what, but yeah, the nozzle looks like it's this big and this is what is depositing the material, and it just moves like a 3D printer, and it builds the walls in the space. So that's really, really cool. Sure. What else are they doing? They're doing organs like they're using, so that's on a big scale, right? The homes are on a huge scale. And then cells, they're using cells and tissue as the material to make organs, like a heart, a functional heart, or like a functional kidney or liver, I think they're also doing.
A functional heart 3D printed?
Yes, yeah. So
maybe this is wild, but don't you feel like they can eventually 3D print like a human being and then use AI and then it starts or, you know, I feel like that's within the realm from what you're describing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's terrifying. And they also, I think there's a thing for burn victims. There's spray skin. I think that's a thing that they have already with, and it's in the same field of 3D printing where they just like have skin and you could just spray it on the burn. Wow. So if you use that with the 3D printed organs, 3D print a brain real quick.
I mean, with a little bit of AI, machine learning, now you have, I could have been 3D printed. Who knows?
Exactly. I am 3D printed.
I figured that's why we got you on the show today. We wanted to really hear from the primary source. That's crazy. So just want to make sure we get that. So prosthetics, they're 3D printing homes, like houses for people in, I think did you say like under 24 hours?
Yeah, I think in 24 hours or under 24 hours, something like that. Yeah.
That's wild. And then organs as well, and skin apparently.
Yeah, and food.
Food.
So,
what's going on there?
Which kind of creeps me out. I'm not gonna lie, like that's not really there yet mentally. But there's this company called Nova Meat that I heard about, and they're 3D printing plant-based meats, plant-based steaks. Sorry, my phone is buzzing.
3D printed plant-based steaks. Nova Meats is the company.
Yeah, and they're, I think, an Italian company. And I was on a call with, or like on a conference call or whatever with the CEO, or just listening to him speak. And he was talking about how they're partnering up with this really, really high-end restaurant called Disfrutar. I think it's called that, in Barcelona. And it's like one of the best reviewed restaurants in the world, and blah, 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 whatever. And their plan for post-COVID is to partner up with them and have the robots on display and be printing steaks for this restaurant and serving them, which is super cool.
Cool is definitely one word for it.
Yeah.
All right, so question, would you consume a printed steak, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've tried the Impossible Burger, which
I thought it was decent. I tried it too.
Decent. It's a little weird that it bleeds, and that they've like engineered it so that it would like look and taste like meat down to the, I don't know the name of the scientific name, but it's supposed to bleed like a steak. Yeah, I would try it just to try it for the novelty of it. But would it be in my like regular diet? I don't know.
Not part of your regimen. No. Got it.
I'll send you a video on what the meats actually look like. They kind of look a little too perfect. And they look a little too shiny, and like, I don't know. There's something that's like, am I in a alternate universe? But for other 3D printers, they have there's like resin, there's plastic, they can 3D print metal, ceramics, and things like that. So the input for this would be, I guess, whatever the Impossible Burger is made of. So
wow. Yeah, no, I'm actually really curious to try it. I feel like, the concept is just really new of printing food. But when you first mentioned it, I pictured like, oh, so if I have a printer, I could just eat forever. But you always have to have the ink or whatever they call it for, in the case of food or organs. All right, that's fair. That's super interesting to me. And also, did you mention, you said you listened to some of the creators, or maybe did you say the CEO, co-founder of Nova Meats? Was that on ClubHouse on the conference call?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, it was on Clubhouse. No, I think ClubHouse is all the rage now. What are your thoughts about it?
I think it's interesting. I think that looking at it, I mean, I know all the memes that are so funny about, anybody can be whoever they want to be on Clubhouse, because you just have to write a few words on your bio and then you're a whatever specialist or whatever. But but I think from an app building perspective, it's really cool to look at and to see. They have like town hall meetings every so often just to get feedback from the users, and they actually implement that feedback. And
oh, that's dope.
Yeah, and I think that open communication between the CEOs or the founders or whatever and the users is super, super important to have an app that's going to survive. Yeah,
I mean, it actually reminds me of because you wrote, so it was like a one-pager about kind of your perspective on design, and it sounded like a lot of it had to do with that interaction happening between whoever the creators or the designers are and the actual users. Is that like one of the reasons maybe that the Clubhouse model and approach sort of appeals to you?
Definitely. I definitely think that for design to be successful, or a design's effectiveness really relies on how it performs, and how it performs relies on how closely it has taken into consideration the users. So, and that's what I think they're doing, or at least what I'm seeing, and it's really cool to watch them grow. But yeah, if you want to build something and you want it to remain relevant and remain growing, you need to not only recognize, but collaborate with the users so that they have an input into how this thing is going to be built and programmed. And you, as a designer, need to forfeit some of your control to the users when you collaborate with them. So if I go into a neighborhood that's not mine and I want to design, and I've been commissioned to design a museum or a community center or something like that, it would be a huge, huge mistake for me to go in, observe as the designer, okay, this is, what their culture is, this is what their history is, let me come up with what I think they need, versus being like, okay, let me pull on a few people from this community, let's have a talk, they tell me what their needs are, they tell me what their thoughts are, and we talk about how the community has evolved until then. So you leave room for not only to apply the design to what's been happening, but also what will happen in the future, which I think Clubhouse is really successfully doing so far. It's a cool experiment, to see and to be a part of, I think.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Appreciate you sort of breaking down that philosophy. And yeah, you convinced me to get on Clubhouse. I got on Clubhouse, I think like 2 weeks ago. There was, or actually it was less than that. It was like a week ago. There was, I had that welcome room. It was a little jarring initially, the concept of it, but no, I totally agree. I think it's very cool. And yeah, we'll see how it develops. But as long as they continue to kind of get that feedback and think collaboratively with their users, they should grow in an interesting way. Really cool. All right. Last question I want to ask you for the audience, for all 6 of you tuning in. How can people get started on 3D printing if they're curious about it to the point that they want to do something?
There are a few things they can do. So first of all, there's a few terms that I think are not as widely known as 3D printing, but they're actually good terms to know. So additive manufacturing is kind of like the more official blanket term that covers 3D printing.
Got it.
It's the type of manufacturing that is 3D printing. So if you're looking for a program that covers 3D printing, it would probably be called additive manufacturing, or AM for short. Other terms are fabrication. Generative design is the more digital side of it. So that's like how you input parameters and input information to then build something digitally to then send to a 3D printer. So generative design.
Got it.
And then I think YouTube and Coursera have really good free courses or just intro little clips or classes for that. And then if you get really, really interested, there's an MIT course that I took online, and it's not free, but it is a more substantial course. It's 12 weeks, and it's kind of a long name, but it's Additive Manufacturing for Innovative Design and Production.
Got it.
And it's MIT X Pro. And I really, really recommend it. I knew very surface level stuff about 3D printing before going into it, and I just did it over quarantine, and it really helped me understand a lot more. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Thanks for sharing that, Yassi, and thanks for sharing sort of all this background on 3D printing. I know I certainly learned a lot, and I think, yeah, for anyone tuning in that was even remotely curious about it, there's a ton of awesome info here. So appreciate it. Yassi, thank you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Peace.